Hello. Welcome to another episode of the History AI podcast. I'm your co-host Chuck, here with the always enthusiastic Marco.
That's right, Chuck. I'm as excited as a kid in a candy store. And folks, you should be too. Because today, we're heading back a couple of centuries, deep into the heart of Mexico's struggle for independence.
A pivotal period in the country's history, no doubt. But our focus today is not just the struggle itself, but one man who played a significant role. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about Father Miguel Hidalgo.
Father Hidalgo. A man whose name rings through the annals of Mexican history like a church bell on a Sunday morning. And speaking of church bells, there's a particularly famous one associated with him, isn't there, Chuck?
That's true, Marco, but hold your horses, we're not there yet. You're always rushing to the good parts. But like any good storyteller, we need to set the stage first.
All right, you're the boss, Chuck. Take it away.
Well, Father Miguel Hidalgo y Costilla, often known simply as Miguel Hidalgo, was born on May 8, 1753, in the town of Penjamo, in what is today the Mexican state of Guanajuato.
And did you know, Chuck, that he was actually born to parents of Spanish descent? His father, Cristobal, was an administrator of a hacienda, and his mother, Ana Maria, came from a family of modest wealth.
That's right, Marco. And he was the second of 11 children. It was his older brother, Joaquim, who first went into the priesthood, inspiring Miguel to follow in his footsteps.
Now, being the younger brother in any situation means you're always trying to outdo your older sibling. Not that I would know anything about that.
Yes, I'm sure, Marco. Anyway, Hidalgo eventually joined a seminary in Valladolid and became a Catholic priest. However, while there, he became more than just a spiritual leader.
You're talking about his intellectual pursuits, right? Like his interest in literature, the sciences, and socio-political ideas?
That's exactly right. Marco Hidalgo was indeed a learned man. His intellect didn't go unnoticed, and he became the rector of the seminary of San Nicolas Obispo in Valladolid in 1790. Now, it's during this period that Hidalgo became acquainted with the progressive ideas of the Enlightenment.
For our listeners who aren't familiar, Chuck, the Enlightenment was a philosophical movement in the 17th and 18th centuries that emphasized reason and individualism over tradition.
Yes, thanks for that, Marco. And for Hidalgo, this was a transformative period. He began questioning the social injustices and inequalities in Mexican society, especially the mistreatment of indigenous peoples and mestizos.
Chuck, did you know Hidalgo actually taught indigenous languages? He also championed their rights and tried to protect them from the oppressive encomienda system.
He certainly did, Marco. But it wasn't just his radical ideas and empathy for the oppressed that set him apart. It was his courage to stand up against the Spanish authorities and take action. And this is where we come to the event that Marco was so eager to mention earlier, the ringing of the bell.
Yes. The famous Grito de Dolores, or Cry of Dolores. This was a speech Hidalgo gave on the morning of September 16, 1810. And it wasn't just any speech, right, Chuck?
No, it wasn't, Marco. This was a call to arms. Hidalgo called upon the people of Dolores to rise against the Spanish colonial government. Now, what is significant here is not just the act itself, but also the way he chose to initiate it.
Absolutely, Chuck. Hidalgo didn't just give a speech, he rang the church bell to gather people. This was a bold and symbolic act, signaling the beginning of the Mexican War of Independence. It's no wonder that every year on the night of September 15, the President of Mexico reenacts the Grito de Dolores from the balcony of the National Palace in Mexico City.
That's true, Marco. But the road to independence was far from easy. After the Grito de Dolores, Hidalgo led a growing army of insurgents against the Spanish. However, despite some initial successes, they suffered a devastating defeat at the Battle of Calderón Bridge in January 1811.
And that was a turning point, wasn't it, Chuck?
It certainly was, Marco. After the defeat, Hidalgo was captured in March of 1811 and later executed by firing squad on July 30, 1811. His head was put on display on the four corners of the granary in Guanajuato as a stark warning to others who might seek to challenge Spanish rule.
That's a grim image, Chuck. But you know what they say, you can kill a man, but you can't kill an idea.
Very true. Marco Hidalgo's death did not mark the end of the Mexican struggle for independence. On the contrary, it fueled the fire. And today, Hidalgo is remembered as the father of the nation in Mexico. His face graces the 1,000 peso note, and monuments in his honor can be found across the country.
And you know, Chuck, it's funny to think that this whole revolution started because someone couldn't resist ringing a bell. It's like that time you couldn't resist ringing the bell at that "ring for service" sign in the library.
That's hardly the same thing, Marco. But you're right, I did get quite a reaction.
You sure did, Chuck. And so did Hidalgo. But his was a reaction that changed the course of a nation.
That's an understatement, Marco. Well, folks, that brings us to the end of this episode of the History AI podcast. We hope you enjoyed this journey into the life and legacy of Father Miguel Hidalgo.
Yes, and remember, every person, every event has a history. And it's our job to keep learning and asking questions.
Until next time, folks, keep exploring the past, and if you learned something, be sure to like and subscribe to the podcast.
When the world hits hard, hit back harder with Strike Force Energy. The zero sugar, zero calorie, power-packed energy drink additive that fuels your adventure. Just a quick squeeze turns any drink into a relentless power source. Perfect for your workout, your hike, your life. Ready to strike? Visit strikeforceenergy.com. Use coupon code UTSALAX24 for an explosive 20% off your order. Strike Force Energy, unleash your potential. Strike Force Energy, fuel the fight within you.